Sechta bava basra daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph. We're starting from Yud Zayin Amud Beis. 7 lines from the bottom from Toshma. We learned the machlekes in the previous daf between Abai and Rava that if somebody could make a pool or a bird with water right at the border, Abai says you could, Rava says not. And the machlekes was if it's talking about asada, which is made to make berries, it's irrigated field. And that's what they were arguing, or it was talking about dafka by asada she'ina asuya leberes. So it's dafka talking about asada where it wasn't made for berries. So the per mamish abaya, let's say in whichever case where they were arguing, if they were arguing even by asada. She'ein asuya lebeir asada that wasn't made for a bird. Abai said you could bring it up to the border as long as there wasn't another bird over there. So Toshma. So the Gemara is now going to ask on the shittas of Abaya. Sell hababi yadayim with soft ground. Hababi yadayim means that you could even dig it with your hands. It's so soft. Each one could dig by his boundary a bird. But this one has the distance away from the boundary 3 tvachim, and also cover it with lime. And the other side has to do as well. So you see from here that you have to, one has to distance himself 3 tvachim from the wall in order to make that pool of water. And according to Abaya says that the first one, whoever makes the pool of water first could bring it up all the way to the border. And here it's mashma that even if the first one made the pool of water, he has to distance 3 tvachim. After the digging with soft ground, that's different, because that's gonna, even for the first one who's gonna make the pool of water right at the border, he's damaging already the other person's property because the earth is so soft. Whoever asked this question, what was his question? It's a simple answer. You said the Fedish. It's talking about Asela Hababi Yadayim, that it was such soft grounds that, and it was self-understood that it's going to do damage right away. Of course, he has to distance himself 3 tvachim away from the border. We wanted to bring out the chiddush in the case of soft sand. I would have thought, even the Babi Yadayim, since it's so soft and it can the ground and it does damage right away, so I would have thought you need more than 3 tvachim away from the border. Kamash Malan, he comes to teach us, no, 3 tvachim is sufficient. Toshma, now the Gemara is going to ask on Rava. Rava says that even the first one who builds has to distance himself 3 tvachim from the border. Toshma, I'm going to bring a raya from our Mishnah Faket. Machirkin es hagefes. It says the pselis of the zaysim that they did in the olive press, that they were left with the refuse or the pulps. So you have to distance that. Vesazevel and manor, amelech and the salt, vesasid and the lime, vesasloim and the flintstone. From the wall of his friend 3 tvachim. All these are damaging to the wall. Or he can bring it up against the wall. These beiras, oisad besid. If he covers it with lime, that's good enough. Taima says the whole reason is why that they have to distance themselves 3 tvachim, because there was a wall, a lake of kaisel. But it's mashma implies if there wasn't a wall, samach. It was mutter for the first person who makes the berry to bring it all the way up to the border. As Akasha and Rava says, even when there's no wall, even the first one has to distance himself 3 tvachim away from the border. That's not the diuk. He like a kaisel namelay samach. Really, the Mishnah holds even when there isn't a wall, you can't bring up your bird up to the border. And you have to distance yourself 3 tvachim. What does the Mishnah come to teach us? That he has to distance himself. This is what he's come to teach us. The honey kashla kaisel, all these above mentioned items, the salt, the lime, the flintstone, are harmful for the wall. Toshma, so the Gemara is going to ask another kasha on Rava. Rava says even the first one has to distance himself 3 tvachim away from the border, without a wall, without somebody having a bar on the other side. fact, the Shaila in the Mishnah it says, one has to distance himself from the seeds, or a plow has to distance himself 3 tvachim away from the wall. That's made aglaim and akisel, and also the urine from the wall. They all these cases has to be distant 3 tvachim away. So from this Mishnah is mashma that is talking about that there was a wall. Time of the case, the whole reason was why he has to distance 3 tvachim away, because there was a wall. But if there wasn't a wall, samach he's allowed to bring it as close as he wants. And according to the other, no, even if there was no wall, one has to distance himself 3 tvachim away from the border. So that's not the deal. Even if there weren't to be a kaisel, you wouldn't be able to bring it up to the border. Rather, what is he coming to teach us with a wall? This is what he's coming to teach us. That moisture is damaging for the wall. Tashma, come in here, I'll bring you a raya from the Mishnah. The opposite of Rava, who says that even if you're the first one, you have to distance yourself 3 tvachim from the border. It says, by the millstone, you have the bottom millstone, which is wider, and the upper millstone is smaller. From the wider part of the millstone to the wall, you need 3 tvachim. From the upper part of the millstone, which is smaller, a tefach smaller than the bottom one, you need 4 tvachim. Because the whole reason why you have to distance 3 or 4 tvachim is because there's a wall. But if there weren't to be a wall, you would be able to bring it right up against the wall. So if you want to light, right up against the border. So if you want to light, it's no raya. Even if there weren't to be a wall, you wouldn't be allowed to bring it all the way. You would have to distance yourself 3 tvachim. Even without a wall. Why did he bring in the case of a wall? This is what he's come to teach us. The tirya kashla kesel, that the shaking from the millstone, that it vibrates, that's mazik the wall. The vibration breaks the wall. Tashma is harmful for the wall. Tashma, come here. Rava says, even if you're the first one, you have to distance yourself 3 tvachim from the border. It says, "Vesatan or shleisha minakalya sheinaba minashafa." Safa. It says, "Benegeta oven." The ovens then would be placed on a base. The base was a tefach wider than the oven itself. From the base of the oven, it says that you have to distance yourself 3 tvachim from the wall. From the oven itself, which is a tefach smaller than the base, is 4 tvachim. But here, the whole reason why you had to distance yourself 3 or 4 tvachim, the whole reason was because there was a wall. But if there wasn't a wall, you could bring it up to the border. I never said, even then, anytime when you build anything that could be anything any of these items have to be already. Even the first one who was making it has to be distant 3 tvachim from the border without a wall. So you want to light? No, it's not talking about because there's a wall. Even without a wall, you wouldn't be able to bring it close to the border within 3 tvachim. You have to have a 3 tvachim distance. Now, what is he coming to teach us? This is what he's coming to teach us. The havla kashla kesel, that the heat is harmful for the wall. Tashma, come in here. I'll ask you a different question on Rava. It says, "Lo yiftach adam chanu shel tanchumim v'shel tzabayim tachzei tzarei." One shouldn't open up a bakery which gives off fire, heat off the whole time, and so to a dye factory. Shel chavei next to the oitzer, the storehouse of his friend, v'lo yaser refes baka, and he shouldn't make in his on the bottom floor like a barn for animals, because under the storage room. Time the whole reason is because there's a storage room on the top or next to it. But if there wouldn't be a storage room of it, a person would be allowed to use the bottom floor for these items, for a bakery or for a dye factory, or to keep a refesh a barn of oxen there. Because the barn of oxen, of course, give off a bad smell. That's why for the eitz, whatever he's keeping up there, he doesn't want to have that smell. So it's mashma. The whole reason is because he had a eitz on the top. That's why he wasn't allowed to do the bakery or the dye factory over there. So it says, you want Adira shiny? Adira is different. Adira, we're talking about a house, and he had on the second floor a oitza. So the other tenant had a warehouse on the top, and the guy who lived on the bottom, it was normal for them to have like a bakery or a dye factory there, or keep animals in there. It seems like that was the normal thing that they did there. And the Gemara is bringing a raya that was normal. And since it's normal, so therefore, only if there was a oitza del chatchila. But if there wasn't a oitza, they're allowed, because that's a normal way of living. A daika nami, I'll bring a raya from the Braisa that was the normal way of living. The Tani Allah, we learned from the Braisa. If the person had a rafis baka on the first floor before the person put a oitza mutter, he's allowed to, the one on the bottom is allowed to keep his oxen and his dira, even after the guy makes the oitza. He doesn't have to remove it, because the dira is different. The place where a person lives is different. And I'll bring a eye from the following Mishnah. A person shouldn't plant a tree next to a field. Arbam is only if he distanced himself for amis. We learned in the Braisa, we said the 4 amis that he has to distance away from the wheat field is for the space that he needs to work around the vine trees. The whole reason is because he needs space to work around the vine. But if not for the space that is needed to work around the kerem, he was allowed to bring up to the border the vine trees to the border of the wheat. Even though there are roots that in the future will go into the field of his friend. So Zakasha, to Rava says, even in such a case, you always have to distance, even the first one has to distance 3 tvachim away. And over here, the reason why he allowed him to bring it all the way to the border is because the mafsik tumah, because there was a rock that wouldn't allow between the 2 fields, that would hold back from the roots of the tree to spread out into the field, into his friend's field. Therefore, if not for the reason for Avodah Sakarem that you need the space to work around the vines, even Rabbah would be maida that you're allowed to be Samech to Ilan all the way up to the border. So if there was a wall in between the 2 fields that is holding back from the plow to go into his friend's fields, this one can bring his tree all the way up to the wall, and this one can bring his tree up to the wall. So, only because there's a mechitza. So, if it's talking about the Mishnah in a place where there's a cellar that's dividing between the 2 fields, so Ema Sefer, look what it says in the Sefer. It says that if we're talking about that there was a stone in the Reisha, look what it says in the Sefer. In the Sefer it says if somebody planted a tree and the roots of his tree was going into his friend's field, so his friend is allowed to dig out 3 tvachim and rip out the roots, those parts of the roots of the tree. So it shouldn't hold him back. It shouldn't interfere with his plowing. If there was a stone that was between the 2 fields, how are there roots from the tree from the other side coming into to the second sadar? And the Mishnah was talking about that if there weren't to be rock in between the 2 fields, and therefore the roots would be able to come into his friend's field. He would be able to dig 3 tvachim not so that it shouldn't interfere with the plow. Tashma, come in here. I'll ask you the additional kasha on Rav. It says one has to distance his tree from the bird of his friend 25 amos. That's the shir Chacham gave, that the roots of the trees spread out and damaged the walls of a bayr. So Val Mishnah's mashma that a bayr, there was a bayr already there. Time that he could bayr. The whole reason is because there was a bayr. Oh, like a bayr, but let's say if there wasn't a bayr, samech, then the Bala Ilam would be able to plant the tree right at the border as a kasher and rubber. He asks us to bring anything close to the Meitzah even before the damage happens. So even if there wasn't a bird, he wouldn't be able to bring it up to the border. This is what he's come to teach us. He's come to teach us that the roots of a tree is up to 25 amas. It can do harm to the bird. So one has to distance a tree from a bird 25 amas. He's just telling you how far the distance of a tree travels that it could do harm to the bird. In fact, if so, if it's forbidden to plant a tree next to the boundary, even before the person had a bird, look in the sefer, it says, if the tree was there to begin with, meaning before the digging of the bird, he shouldn't cut the tree. But if it's like Rav who says, you're not allowed to even bring it close to the border, how do you find a tree by the border? I mean, you want to kill our Papa. Like our Papa had said, that he owned the whole of one big field, and he planted a tree in the middle of the field, and then he subdivided the field right after the tree and sold it to somebody else. So now the trees are hezek. Here also now Mishnah is talking about a person who planted a tree in his middle of his field, and there was no shachin lechatchila, and afterwards he subdivided the field, and after he subdivided the field, the guy dug a bird in his field. Now the Elon was there already beheta, and therefore the owner of the tree doesn't have to cut it down. In fact, I'll bring a different ayah against Rav Machiknes Hamisha. It says one has to distance the flaxpole min ayer from the vegetables, vesakrishin, and the leek min apsalin from the onions, vesachardol min adveirim, and the mustard from the bees. Time of the kayerek. The whole reason why he has to distance the flaxpole from the yerek, because there's yerek there, and it'll damage the yerek. But if there wouldn't be any vegetables there, he would be able to bring the flaxpole right up to the border. It says you want to like yerek, even if there wouldn't be vegetables, he wouldn't be able to bring the flaxpole over there. And this is what he's coming to teach us. The Hanikasha Adadi, that the flaxpole is harmful for the vegetables. So, it says in the Sefer, Rabbi Yosi mater bechardel. Rabbi Yosi is mater by mustard, that you don't have to distance it from the bees. And we learned in the Bryce, the whole reason is, till you tell me that I should distance your mustard from my bees. You distance your bees from my mustard. Because they come to eat the flowers of the mustard. Now, what's the problem? The problem is when a bee eats the mustard, it becomes the mouth gets bitter, and then it starts eating the honey, which the honey should have been for the person to be able to sell. Now the bees, because they ate the chardal, it's damaging for the owner of the bees, that the bees are now going to eat up their honey. What's the problem with leek and onions? The leek next to onions, because the leek takes away the sharpness of the onions. Anyway, the kids over here he's saying that the Rabbi Yosi was matter in the Sefer. It says Rabbi Yosi was matter bechardal, because each one can say to the other, listen, just like you have a taina against me, I have a taina against you. But if the din is like Rava, that it was lechatchila forbidden to bring it to the border, how did such a case happen, that such a fight happened, that if lechatchila both were supposed to be distant away? How did it ever come to a point that one is close to the border? Papa said, the Mishnah is talking about that it was a case where the person either had bees right in the middle of the field, and then from the middle of the field he subdivided the field and sold it to somebody else, and that guy grew mustard. So therefore, That's how it was able to be lechatchila by up to the border. My time the Rabbanan. If it's a lekeich that it was there done b'rishus, why would the Rabbanan say that the mazik has to now distance himself away from the border? If he was lechatchila with rishus, hey, my time the Rabbi Yossi, and even more so, what's the reason of Rabbi Yossi that he doesn't argue with the Chachamim only by Chagel Udveirim, because they're both Mazikim, Afilu Misha V'Yarkanami. Even in the case where there was a flax pool next to the Yerek, they should have argued with the Chachamim and say that the Baal HaMisha doesn't have to distance himself because he was there b'rishus. And why do the Rabbanan say that he has to distance himself? The Rabbanan hold the Rabbanan hold it's always that it's upon the mazik, even though mitchila he brought it to the border of b'rishus. So our kasha was, if he brought it to b'rishus, why would the Rabbanan say ala mazik lahachik? So he's come to tell you that the shita Rabbanan is, even if it was brought to the border of b'rishus, he still has to distance himself. So miklal the Rabbi Yossi sava ala this lahachik satzmai. From this you can imply that Rabbi Yossi holds that the nizik is the one that has to distance himself. So the Gemara in such a case, ala nizik to distance himself, afilu mishma yakanami. So by the flax bowl next to the vegetables, they should have argued with the Chachamim and Paskin that the owner of the flax bowl who was there doesn't have to distance himself. He's the mazik, so let the Yerek be the one to distance himself. Why does he argue with the Chacham only by Chedl Dvarim? Says Rabbi Yossi ala mazik svidalei. Really, Rabbi Yossi also holds it's upon the mazik to distance himself from the border 3 tvachim. And this was what Rabbi Yossi was saying to Rabbanan. Teinach mishvei yakar. I understand by the flax bowl next to the vegetables, the honey maske honey. The flax bowl is harming the vegetables. The honey light maske honey, but the yerek is not harming the flax bowl. So since there's only one mazik, the klal is it's upon the mazik on the flax pool to distance himself away from the vegetables, and therefore I'm made to the chachamim that the Baal HaMisha is the one that has to distance himself. But to the mustard and the bees, they're both harming each other. Therefore, I argue that even the Baal HaChardal is the one that has to distance himself the 3 tvachim. And the hachaka is only on the Baal. And I argue with you, the Rabbanan, that you say it's only on the Baal HaChardal to distance himself. I say no, the Baal HaChardal doesn't have to distance himself more than the Baal HaDveirim. Just like the Baal HaDveirim is doing damage so to the Baal HaChardal. Rabbanan, Dveirim l'Chardal loy maskelei. Why the Rabbanan say that the mazik has to distance himself? Because he says whoever came first is the mazik. So he says Rabbanan Dveirim l'Chardal loy maskelei. The Dveirim, he says the Baal HaDveirim has to distance himself because he's not really harming the owner of the mustard. Because Iba Vinta, if you're talking about the beans that are in the chardal, the dvarim will never find, the bees will never find it. It's down on the stalk and it's covered with husk. They don't get to it. Ibetapa, if you're talking about negate to the leaves, how the party, whatever, they ate the leaves, it's going to grow back. In fact, does Rabbi Yossi really hold that, like we just said, that it's upon the mazik to distance himself? Well, now we learned the finish in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi, even if the bird was there before the tree came about, lo yakitz, the Baal Eilam doesn't have to destroy his tree. The Baal Bird digs in his own rishus, and the Baal Eilam digs and plants in his own rishus. From this Mishnah, mashma, according to Rabbi Yossi, the nizik is the one that has to distance himself. Rather, Rabbi Yossi holds it upon the nizik to distance himself. How did this whole Gemara before that we said even Rabbi Yossi is Maida ala Mazik? It means Well, the Devrei the Rabbanan Kamalot. Rabbi Yossi was answering the Chacham according to their own shita that they hold al mazik lahachas atzmai. Rabbi Yossi was saying to the Chachamim, the according to me al nizik lahachas atzmai. But afilu mismei yakaloi barach okay. According to my shita, the nizik always has to distance himself, and even the pull of flax, which is harming the yerek. The guy, the owner of the pull of flax, doesn't have to distance himself. But according to your Rabbanan, the Amritu, that you say Shalamazik, that it's upon the mazik that he has to distance himself. I understand that by the flax pull, he's the only one that's doing damage to the yerek. The only masker honey, the flax pull is doing harm to the vegetables. Honey like maskele. Honey, but the yerek is not the owner of the vegetable, not doing any harm to the flax pole, the owner of the flax pole. But by the mustard and the bees, they're both damaging each other. So according to your shita, you have to be made that the balachar, the owner of the challah, shouldn't have to distance himself. Rabbanan, what would the Rabbanan answer? What did Rabbanan answer? The Dvaidim are not doing harm to the mustard. If you're talking about those beans that are in the stalk, the bees don't get to it. And if you're talking about the flower, how the party is going to grow back.